Every Luna failed to calm the Alpha King's wolf, until a quiet Omega sang beside him at midnight. The castle of Ravenmoor stood tall and cold against the night sky, its stone walls holding more sorrow than any pack was meant to carry. For 3 years, the halls had echoed with the same sound at midnight, a low, aching howl that came from deep within Alpha King Cain Draven. It was not the howl of a wolf calling its pack. It was the sound of a wolf in pain, a wolf that refused to be soothed. Everyone in the kingdom knew the story, though few dared to speak of it aloud. 3 years ago, a rival pack had attacked Ravenmoor during the Blood Moon Festival. In a single night, Cain had lost his first mate, his younger brother, and dozens of loyal warriors. He had survived, but something inside him had broken. His wolf, once proud and steady, had become restless, wounded, and impossible to calm. Since that night, the council had brought him one Luna candidate after another. Strong she-wolves from powerful packs, women trained since birth to lead, to fight, to stand beside a king. Each one entered his chamber with confidence, believing her strength would be enough to settle his wolf. Each one left in tears, or worse, injured by a beast that recognized no bond in their presence. The pack elders grew anxious. A king without a Luna was a king without an heir, and a kingdom without an heir was a kingdom waiting for war. But no one knew how to fix what could not be forced. No one, except a girl who was never meant to be noticed at all. Wren Ashby was an Omega, the lowest rank among wolves. Omegas were meant to serve, to stay quiet, to be useful without being seen. Wren had grown up this way, moving through the castle like a shadow, folding linens, scrubbing floors, carrying trays to rooms where no one looked at her twice. She did not mind it, not really. She had learned long ago that being invisible meant being safe. The one thing Wren allowed herself was her voice. When she worked alone, she hummed old songs her mother used to sing, gentle melodies with no real words, just soft sounds that rose and fell like breathing. She never sang where others could hear. Omegas who drew attention rarely stayed Omegas for long. Sometimes they simply disappeared from the castle altogether, sent away to serve smaller, harsher packs. Wren had no wish to test her luck. On the night everything changed, Wren had stayed later than usual, finishing a stack of linens for the guest chambers. The castle was silent, the halls lit only by torches that flickered against the stone. She was walking past the west wing, arms full of folded sheets, when the first roar tore through the corridor. She froze. The sound was unlike anything she had heard before, raw and full of grief, shaking the very air around her. She knew, as everyone in the castle knew, that this was the king's wolf breaking free again. She should have turned and run the other way. Instead, her feet carried her forward, drawn by something she could not explain. She found herself outside the heavy oak doors of the king's private chamber, the sound of claws scraping against stone coming from within. Guards stood a safe distance away, their faces pale, unwilling to get closer. No one moved to help. No one knew how. Wren did not know why she did what she did next. Perhaps it was exhaustion. Perhaps it was the ache in her own chest, the quiet loneliness she carried every day, recognizing itself in the sound of his pain. She set down the linens, sank to the floor against the wall outside his door, and began to sing. It was the same wandering melody her mother used to hum, soft and low, with no real words, just sound carried gently through the air. She did not sing loudly. She did not sing to be heard. She sang the way she always did, for herself, to ease her own heart. The roaring stopped. Wren's breath caught, certain she had imagined it, but the silence held. She kept singing, her voice trembling at first, then steadying as the quiet stretched on. On the other side of the door, something shifted, the scraping claws replaced by the soft, uneven breathing of an animal finally settling down. For the first time in 3 years, the Alpha King's wolf did not fight through the night. It simply lay down, ears turned toward the sound drifting through the wood, something in its chest loosening after years of holding on too tight. Wren stayed until her voice grew hoarse, then quietly gathered the linens and slipped away before anyone noticed her there. She told herself it meant nothing, that it was only a coincidence, and went to bed as though the night had not happened at all. But word travels fast in a castle full of wolves with sharp ears. By morning, the guards had told the story to the healers, and the healers had told it to the advisors, and by midday, the whole castle was whispering about the strange silence that had fallen over the king's chamber at midnight. When Cain woke, calmer than he had been in years, he demanded answers. His advisors, embarrassed, admitted that a kitchen omega had been found sitting outside his door. Only a kitchen omega, one of them said, dismissing the idea that she could have mattered at all. Something flickered behind Cain's eyes at those words, a low growl rumbling in his chest, before he even realized he had made the sound. His wolf, usually silent unless enraged, pressed forward with an interest Cain did not understand. He ordered that the omega be brought to him. Ren stood trembling in the receiving hall, certain she was about to be punished for being somewhere she should not have been. She lowered her eyes the moment Cain entered, bracing herself for his anger. Instead, she heard only tired silence, followed by a quiet, almost broken request. "Sing," he said, "please." Ren looked up, startled. The king before her did not look like the powerful, distant ruler she had imagined from a distance. He looked exhausted, his eyes shadowed, his shoulders carrying a weight far heavier than his crown. For a moment, she saw not an alpha king, but a man who had been alone with his grief for far too long. Hesitantly, she began to hum the same melody from the night before. The Cain closed his eyes, and something in his expression eased, the tension in his jaw softening, as though a hand had reached inside his chest and gently untangled a knot that had been pulled too tight for years. When she finished, silence stretched between them, but it was not uncomfortable. Cain opened his eyes and studied her, not as a king studying a servant, but as though he was seeing her, truly seeing her, for the first time. "How did you know to do that?" he asked quietly. Ren shook her head. "I didn't know anything, my king. I only sang because it was what I always do when things feel too heavy to hold." Cain said nothing for a long moment, but he did not dismiss her. Instead, he asked her to stay nearby, an excuse dressed as an order, though both of them sensed there was something more beneath it. In the days that followed, Ren found herself summoned again and again, first to sing in the evenings, then to sit quietly in the room while Cain worked through matters of the pack, and eventually to walk beside him in the gardens as the sun set behind the mountains. The court noticed immediately, and the whispers turned sharp and unkind. An omega sitting beside the king, an omega walking where only lunas were meant to walk. Some called her foolish, some called her a distraction unworthy of her place. A few of the higher-ranking wolves openly mocked her, certain that whatever strange effect she had on the king's wolf would fade the moment true strength returned to court. But it did not fade. Every candidate before Ren had tried to calm Cain's wolf through dominance, matching his power with strength, presenting confidence and control, as though those things alone could heal a wound that deep. Ren offered none of that. She offered patience. She offered stillness. She offered the simple, steady presence of someone unafraid to sit beside pain without trying to fix it or flee from it. One evening, as autumn winds swept through the castle gardens, Cain found himself speaking of the night of the attack, for the first time since it happened. He told Ren of the fire, the screams, the moment he realized his mate was gone, and he had been powerless to stop it. His voice cracked as he spoke, the weight of 3 years finally spilling out into words instead of silence. Ren did not offer empty comfort. She did not tell him it would be all right, or that time would heal everything, the way so many others had tried before. She simply listened, her hand resting gently near his, present without demanding anything in return. "You're not broken," she said softly, when he finally fell quiet. "You're grieving. There's a difference." Something in Cain's chest shifted at those words, an old ache easing just slightly, as though someone had finally named what he had been carrying, without judgment or fear. His wolf, usually a storm beneath his skin, settled quietly that night, calmer than it had been in years, curling close to the surface of his thoughts the way it once had, long ago, before the world had torn everything from him. It was in that stillness that Cain finally understood what none of the Luna candidates, nor his advisors, nor even he himself had grasped before. His wolf was never searching for someone to match his power. It was searching for someone who could sit with his pain without flinching away from it, someone who could offer quiet instead of noise, patience instead of proof. Ren had never tried to prove anything. She had simply been herself, unguarded and honest, and that had been enough. When Cain finally stood before the Pack Council to announce his choice of Luna, the room fell into stunned silence, followed quickly by outrage. An Omega as Luna, of the strongest pack in the region, was unthinkable to many of the older wolves, who believed rank determined worth, who believed strength alone kept a kingdom safe. Cain did not raise his voice to argue with them. He simply allowed his wolf to answer instead. The moment he spoke Ren's name aloud, claiming her before the entire Pack Council, his wolf surged forward with a howl so powerful it rattled the windows and silenced every voice in the room. It was not a howl of rage, the kind the pack had grown used to fearing. It was a howl of relief, of recognition, of a wound finally beginning to close after years of being left open. No one argued after that. No one dared question a bond that ancient instincts themselves had confirmed beyond any doubt. Ren stood at the center of the hall, overwhelmed by the sudden shift in how the world around her seemed to see her, yet steadied by Cain's hand finding hers. For the first time in her life, she was not invisible. She was not overlooked. She was seen, fully and completely, by the one person whose pain she had never tried to fix, only to share. In the months that followed, the pack slowly came to understand what Cain already knew in his heart. Ren's strength had never been loud or forceful. It lived in her patience, her steadiness, and her willingness to remain present in moments when everyone else had chosen to look away. She did not calm the Alpha King's wolf by matching its power. She calmed it simply by being someone it never had to fight to feel safe beside. Years later, when new pups asked how the king had found his true Luna, the elders would tell the story of every powerful candidate who had tried and failed, and of the quiet Omega who had once sat outside a door in the dark, offering nothing but a gentle song and an open heart. It was never about strength meeting strength. It was about someone finally choosing to stay.